They came upon us like a storm, an alien species wielding overwhelming technology and an unquenchable thirst for domination. Monstrous in every sense, towering, sinewy beings whose skin shimmered with a metallic hue and whose eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. Their bodies were a grotesque fusion of biology and machine, with mechanical tendrils snaking out of their arms, intertwining with pulsating organic tissue. Their technology was beyond anything we could comprehend. Ships that bent the sky as they moved, weapons that emitted pulses of energy, vaporizing anything in their path, and armor that regenerated almost as quickly as it was damaged. These cold, efficient conquerors lacked empathy, embodying everything antithetical to our values. They were not just different from us. They were the embodiment of relentless domination, driven solely by the desire to consume and control. Their towering warships pierced our skies, casting shadows over our cities and plunging entire nations into darkness as they moved to strip our world of its resources. Their arrival wasn't marked by diplomacy or demands, only swift and brutal violence. Entire cities disappeared overnight beneath the crushing weight of their bombardments, reduced to ash and rubble before we could even comprehend the onslaught. I remember when New York fell, the skyline that had once stood as a symbol of human ingenuity crumbled in hours. London was next, its centuries-old history obliterated beneath alien fire. My own hometown, a small city barely on any map, was reduced to nothing. I watched from a distance as the place where I grew up, where I had friends, memories, a life, was engulfed in a wave of blinding light and erased from existence. Every city and home lost was a fragment of ourselves we could never reclaim. Their assault was swift and merciless. Our defences obliterated, armies shattered, leaders captured or killed. There was no mercy in their advance, no room for negotiation or surrender. We were nothing more than obstacles to be eliminated. They swept through our streets with forces that were a tide of cold, unfeeling machines and monstrous soldiers, crushing any resistance. One battle in particular stands out. Downtown Chicago, where a small group of our soldiers made a final stand behind makeshift barricades. The streets were littered with overturned cars, burning debris, and the shattered remains of our defences. The alien soldiers came in relentless waves, their towering forms blotting out the sky, weapons glowing with eerie energy. I watched as our people fought valiantly, firing round after round into the oncoming tide. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean with bare hands. One by one they fell, their screams drowned out by the mechanical roar of the invaders. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning flesh. The ground shook as monstrous constructs advanced, their cold eyes betraying no emotion or hesitation. The battle was over before it even began, a brutal reminder that we were not fighting an enemy that could be reasoned with or intimidated. We faced something unstoppable, and the streets of Chicago bore the proof of that devastation. They moved with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, devoid of compassion or hesitation. The ground trembled beneath their relentless march as they not only conquered us, but aimed to erase us entirely, wiping clean every trace of our existence as though we had never been. We tried to fight back, throwing everything we had at them, our soldiers, our weapons, and desperate makeshift militias rising as our governments crumbled. These militias were composed of ordinary people, teachers, mechanics, shopkeepers, anyone who could hold a weapon. They employed guerrilla tactics, striking swiftly from the shadows before disappearing into the ruins, using old rifles, homemade explosives, and whatever they could scavenge. Amidst the chaos, acts of heroism emerged. I remember Elena, a young woman barely out of her teens, who led her group into an ambush to lure the enemy away from fleeing families. She knew it was suicide, yet she acted without hesitation, her eyes filled with a fire the aliens could never comprehend. The militias were our last spark of defiance, their courage a testament to our refusal to simply disappear. But their efforts only delayed the inevitable. The pervasive fear gnawed at our bones as the reality of our doom sank in. We were outmatched in every conceivable way, technologically, strategically, even spiritually. The alien presence was like a void, an empty hunger devouring everything in its path. Their warships blotted out the sun, casting entire cities into shadow, while their troops moved without fear or hesitation. They dismantled us piece by piece with chilling efficiency, targeting our infrastructure. Power plants, water supplies, and transportation networks were among their first objectives. Communication lines were severed, leaving us deaf and blind, unable to coordinate a response. Key institutions were systematically destroyed, hospitals bombed, emergency services eliminated, and government buildings reduced to rubble. They dismantled the backbone of our civilization, turning our advanced cities into disconnected, powerless ruins. Each strike was precise, aimed at crippling our ability to organize, fight, or survive. Without power, leadership, or hope, we became isolated pockets of resistance waiting to be extinguished. We watched as our cities burned, loved ones were taken from us, and the life we had known disintegrated before our eyes. Personal losses were immense. My sister Anna was dragged away by the invaders. Her terrified screams echoed in my ears long after she was gone, her face twisted in fear as they pulled from our home. The Eiffel Tower, a symbol of love and human ingenuity, crumbled to the ground as alien beams tore through its iron lattice, turning it into a pile of twisted metal and dust. Each loss felt like a part of ourselves being ripped away, leaving behind a hollow emptiness that nothing could fill. Our homes became war zones. Streets ran red with the blood of those who stood their ground. Entire neighborhoods were razed, entire communities wiped from existence. Every battle was a massacre, every attempt to resist a brutal reminder of our fragility. The air filled with ash and screams, our streets became graveyards, and soon even the will to fight began to erode. It seemed there was nothing we could do, nothing to turn the tide against such a superior force. Yet, amidst the systematic erasure, something within us sparked, a flicker of resistance born from our darkest instincts and the raw, desperate will to survive. The massacre at Athens marked the turning point. Watching the live stream of families torn apart, hearing the last broadcast of a mother shielding her children while pleading for mercy that would never come, something changed. The world paused and a collective rage was born. It was no longer just about survival, it was about retribution. That broadcast of unimaginable horror rekindled a fire in us, a determination to fight not just for our lives, but for the very soul of humanity. It reminded us that we still had something worth fighting for, something worth protecting, and that we would not go quietly into extinction. Driven by desperation, fury, and an unyielding refusal to die quietly, our scientists and engineers worked tirelessly in underground labs, often in total darkness to avoid detection. They designed microscopic nanobots capable of infecting alien biology directly. This process was fraught with risk. Every test carried the chance of failure, and many brave volunteers sacrificed themselves to make it possible. The labs were filled with exhaustion, fear, and a heavy sense of urgency, racing against time as each second brought the end of humanity closer. Despite setbacks, tests resulting in horrific deaths, unintended mutations, and moments where hope seemed to vanish, they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that this was our only chance. The price was steep. Many scientists never saw the end of their work, collapsing from fatigue or dying in alien raids. Yet, from this crucible of suffering, our final weapon was forged, the nanobots that would be our salvation. In a somber and intense voice, with a rising crescendo as the horror unfolds. These machines were not built to kill, but to transform, to corrupt from the inside out, taking everything from our enemy as they had taken everything from us. We unleashed the nanobots into the alien invaders with cold precision, through contaminated supplies, infected captives, and by sacrificing the brave souls who carried them directly into the enemy's heart. It was a slow, agonizing process, but it worked. We watched as the invaders' physiology began to change, the transformation creeping beneath their skin like a disease. Their scales bubbled and blistered, peeling away to reveal raw, red flesh. The metallic sheen that once covered their bodies dulled and cracked, giving way to grotesque, human-like skin that seemed to pulse and writhe on its own. Bones snapped and reformed, limbs contorting unnaturally, muscles swelling and shifting beneath the surface, making them howl in agony. Their eyes, once a cold, mechanical blue, began to cloud and bleed, turning into something disturbingly familiar, almost human, but twisted and filled with terror they could no longer suppress. The transformation was neither clean nor painless. It was a horrifying spectacle of alien flesh being reshaped into a grotesque mimicry of ourselves, violating their very essence and leaving them trembling, confused, and filled with growing dread. But it wasn't just their flesh that we changed. The nanobots carried encoded instructions, commands that infiltrated their very minds. Our memories, rage, and terror seeped into their consciousness like a poison. It wasn't enough to simply alter their bodies. We needed to break them from within. I witnessed the confusion and despair flickering in their eyes, the shattering of their once absolute certainty of superiority and purpose. Their ironclad unity splintered under the weight of our indomitable will, a will forged in desperation that refused to be extinguished even in the face of annihilation. In time, entire squads of aliens became grotesque hybrids, caught between their old selves and something hideously different. Their bodies were an unsettling blend of alien and human features. Once rigid, insectoid exoskeletons became pliant and organic. Patches of human-like skin sprouted alongside the tough, scaly armor, creating a patchwork of twisted flesh. Their faces, once devoid of emotion, began to warp. Jaws elongated, mouths twisted into strange, almost human expressions, half-smiles, grimaces of pain, confusion etched into their eyes. They struggled against the transformation, their minds tormented by the conflict between what they were and what they were becoming. Many tried to resist, tearing at their own flesh, attempting to rip away the parts that now felt alien. I saw some collapse under the weight of their own transformation, curled in agony as the war raged both outside and within. Others, confused and terrified, began to show empathy, a trait entirely foreign to them. They protected human captives, defying their superiors, and in their eyes I saw both horror and something that looked like hope, a longing for an identity they could no longer recognize. The hybrids were monstrous, pitiable, and tragic, abominations created by our desperate attempt at survival, trapped in bodies that betrayed their original purpose and minds torn apart by emotions they had never known. These hybrids, with their twisted minds, began to turn against their former masters. The invaders, now beset by an enemy from within, struggled to maintain control as entire squads turned against them. The war shifted, becoming a brutal reflection of the enemy's precision. We stopped fighting on their terms and began striking from the shadows, targeting supply lines, sabotaging communications, and turning their captured technology against them. Grand battles gave way to desperate skirmishes and brutal ambushes. We weaponized everything, poisoning their food, booby-trapping ruins, and using the hybrids as double agents to infiltrate their ranks. Ground warfare transformed into a twisted game of cat and mouse. There were no longer front lines, only fields of death where anyone could be the next victim. The night became our ally, the darkness our cover, as we struck swiftly, leaving chaos in our wake before vanishing into the ruins. The alien invaders, once untouchable, were forced to look over their shoulders, plagued by fear and paranoia as they found themselves hunted by those they had once seen as prey. Our survival no longer relied on valor or strength, but on infection and corruption. We spread like a plague, converting our enemies one by one. The invasion that had once threatened to exterminate us was undone not through heroism, but through a relentless transformation, a dark metamorphosis that bound both species together in a grotesque unity, with our unforgiving spirit at the core. Yet, one truth remained hidden from most, a dark secret behind the transformation we had unleashed. Every human mind that had ever died was not lost. Instead, they were revived, reborn piece by agonizing piece into these new bodies. The nanobots carried not only our memories and emotions, but the very essence of those we had lost. The dead lived again, not in peace, but in the twisted flesh of our enemies. They were not merely shells filled with fragmented memories. They were fully conscious, aware of the grotesque bodies they now inhabited. They retained everything, their memories, fears, hopes, and anger. I saw them wake up, the confusion and horror in their eyes as they looked down at alien limbs, at hands that were no longer their own. They could remember the lives they had lived before, the warmth of family, the comfort of home, and now all of that was overshadowed by the monstrous form they found themselves in. The nanobots reconnected them to life at a terrible price. Their new existence was a nightmare, trapped in twisted flesh, every movement a painful reminder of what they had lost. They fought not just the enemy, but also the madness that came from inhabiting a body never meant to be theirs. It was as if they were caught between two worlds, alive but changed forever, driven by a fury only the resurrected could know. They returned, reshaped and reborn, to fight once more, inhabiting the bodies of those who had once sought to destroy us. It was our final unyielding vengeance, an echo that refused to fade.
Thank you for watching. Like, share and subscribe for more original content. New chapters and standalone stories uploaded weekly.